I've been a cop for almost 10 years now, and I've seen my fair share of strange and heartbreaking things. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. The words echoed in my mind as I drove through the quiet streets. It was one of those nights when the air felt thick with silence, the kind where everything seems still, except for the occasional hum of the radio and the sound of tires on pavement. In my line of work, you learn to expect the unexpected. But that night was something else entirely. It started like any other shift. I was cruising through the city, doing my routine patrol, when the call came in over the radio. The gas station had been robbed, just a few miles from my location. The suspect had fled the scene and was believed to be heading toward the industrial area. I knew that part of town like the back of my hand, and I was already in the area. It didn't seem like a high-risk situation at first. After all, it was just a robbery. Robbers are usually scared and make rash decisions. It should have been a quick catch. I pulled up to the scene. The gas station was lit up in the harsh glow of the streetlights, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The cashier was standing outside, visibly shaken, but she was unharmed. She described the suspect as a man in his late 20s, wearing a hoodie and jeans, with dark hair. He hadn't displayed any weapon, but he'd grabbed the money and bolted before anyone could react. I immediately radioed the description in and began driving toward the industrial area. The streets were eerily empty, and the only sound that filled the silence was the rhythmic hum of the patrol car. My eyes flickered over every corner, every alleyway. It was a quiet night, but I knew better than to let my guard down. As a cop, you're trained to expect the worst, and that's exactly what I did. Then, just as I passed a rundown warehouse, I saw him. A figure darted between two buildings, his hoodie flapping behind him as he moved quickly, almost too quickly to follow. For a moment, I wasn't sure if it was the suspect or just someone trying to get home after a late shift, but the way he moved, darting between shadows and disappearing into the darkness, told me otherwise. "Suspect spotted," I called into my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm on foot." I slammed the brakes and threw the car into park. Without a second thought, I hopped out of the car and sprinted toward the alleyway where I had seen the figure. My boots hit the pavement with a sharp thud as I ran, my pulse quickening in anticipation. My mind was clear. This was just another chase. Catch the bad guy, bring him in, and it would be over. But as I neared the alley, everything changed. The figure darted ahead, his feet slapping the pavement. I pushed myself harder, my heart racing with the pursuit. "Stop! Police!" I shouted, but he didn't even glance back. He was running faster now, jumping over obstacles with fluid movements. I pushed myself even harder, focusing on closing the distance. Then he made a move I hadn't expected. He vaulted over a high chain-link fence, and before I could think, I was following him. I planted my foot, jumped, and cleared the fence with a grunt, landing roughly on the other side. The alley was narrow, the walls closing in as I chased him through the dark, unfamiliar territory. It was only when I finally cornered him in that narrow space, when I saw his face, that everything in my life seemed to freeze. He turned around, panting, and as I shone my flashlight on him, I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was the face I hadn't seen in over 15 years. It was the face of my younger brother. "Nathan?" I whispered, the words escaping my mouth before I could stop them. The man, my brother, stared at me, his expression shifting from one of confusion to shock as he took in my face. For a moment, neither of us moved. Time seemed to stretch, the world standing still as the recognition washed over both of us. "Ryan," he whispered, as if he couldn't quite believe it either. It was him. Nathan. My brother. The kid I had grown up with before life had torn us apart. The kid I had lost track of when I was sent to a foster family across the country. The kid I searched for in vain after I turned 18, hoping to find some trace of him. And now, after all these years, here he was, standing in front of me as a criminal, a man on the run. I took a step forward, my mind reeling. I was a cop. I was supposed to bring him in, arrest him, and uphold the law. But he was my brother, my flesh and blood. "Nathan, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice cracking as I stepped closer to him. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the wariness that ran deeper than the surface. He shook his head bitterly, his face hardening. "What do you think, Ryan? Surviving. The way I've had to my whole life. I couldn't help but wince. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what he'd been through. After all these years of searching, I never imagined this would be where we would meet again, on opposite sides of the law. I took another step toward him, my hands trembling. Nathan, I looked for you. After I turned 18, I looked everywhere. I wanted to find you. I didn't know where you went. He shrugged, the hardness in his gaze returning. It doesn't matter, Ryan. Nobody cared back then. Nobody cares now. I shook my head, taking another step closer. I care, Nathan. I always cared. For a moment his tough exterior cracked. He looked away, and I saw the brief flash of vulnerability in his eyes, the same vulnerability he had as a child. The kid who used to follow me around, the kid who had looked up to me, who trusted me to protect him. And now, here he was, lost, broken, and desperate. I didn't know what else to do, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm so tired, Ryan, so tired of running, so tired of being alone. I felt the weight of his words settle into my chest. I had never known the depth of his pain, the struggles he had gone through after we were separated. He had fought alone, in a world that had never been kind to him. I reached out, my hand trembling as I placed it on his shoulder. You don't have to do this anymore. Let me help you. Please. For a long moment, Nathan didn't respond. But then, as if the years of hurt and the weight of his choices finally became too much for him to bear, he collapsed into my arms. I held him there in that cold alley, the city's distant hum barely audible over the rush of my heartbeat. In that moment, we weren't a cop and a criminal. We were brothers, broken but reunited. That night, I didn't take him in right away. I couldn't. Instead, I listened. He told me about the years of struggles, of bad decisions made out of desperation, of the anger and resentment that had built up inside him. Nathan had never been given a chance, and now as a grown man, he was just trying to survive. Eventually, I knew what I had to do. Nathan would face the consequences of his actions, but he wouldn't face them alone. For the first time in years, he had someone in his corner, someone who cared, someone who wouldn't give up on him. Sometimes life takes us down paths we never expect. We stumble, we fall, and sometimes we break. But sometimes, just sometimes, those paths lead us back to where we belong, back to the people we've lost, back to the family we thought was gone forever. For me and Nathan, that night wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about finding each other again. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. Message to viewer or subscriber. This story is a reminder that no matter where life takes us, no matter how far we fall or how broken we feel, there is always a chance for redemption. It's easy to feel like we're lost, like we're beyond saving. But the truth is, every day is a new chance to make things right. We all face battles, and sometimes it feels like we're fighting them alone. But remember, there's always someone out there who cares. There's always a way back. No matter how much time passes, how many mistakes we make, there's always a chance to rebuild, to reconnect, and to start over. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been lost or felt abandoned, remember, you are never truly alone. Life is unpredictable, but it's also full of surprises. Sometimes, the people we need the most are closer than we think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of family, redemption, and second chances. Keep your head up, and remember, no matter what, you're not alone.